to today's video. Today we're going to be doing the Learn Accessibility by Building a Quiz project that is a part of the new responsive web design course on FreeCodeCamp. After we're finished with our HTML and CSS files, we should have something similar to this, which will have your student info, name, email, date of birth, 2 questions, and then some other questions, and a send button with some other information underneath. So let's get started. Step 1. Welcome to the first part of the accessibility quiz. As you are becoming a seasoned HTML and CSS developer, we have started you off with the basic boilerplate. Start this accessibility journey by providing a language attribute to your HTML element. This will assist screen readers in identifying the language of the page. Step 2. You may be familiar with the meta element already. It is used to specify information about a page, such as the title, description, keywords, and author. Give your page a meta element with the appropriate char set value. The char set attribute specifies the character encoding of the page, and nowadays UTF-8 is the only encoding supported by most browsers. Step 3. Continuing with the meta elements, a viewport definition tells the browser how to render the page, including 1. Betters visual accessibility on mobile and improves SEO, search engine optimization. Add a viewport definition with a content attribute detailing the width and initial scale of the page. Step 4. Another important meta element for accessibility in SEO is the description definition. The value of the content attribute is used by search engines to provide a description of your page. Add a meta element with the name attribute set to description and give it a useful content attribute. Step 5. Lastly, in the head, the title element is useful for screen readers to understand the content of the page. Furthermore, it is an important part of the SEO. Give your page a title that is descriptive and concise. Step 6. Navigation is a core part of accessibility, and the screen readers rely on you to provide the structure of your page. This is accomplished with semantic HTML elements. Add a header and a main element to your page. The header element will be used to introduce the page as well as provide a navigation menu. The main element will contain the core content of your page. Step 7. Within the header, provide context about the page by nesting a one image h1 and nav element. The image should point to this link and have an ID of logo. Step 8. A useful property of the selectable vector graphics is that it contains a path attribute which allows the image to be scaled without affecting the resolution of the resultant image. Currently, the image element is assuming its default size, which is too large. Correctly scale the image using its ID as a selector and setting the width to max 100 pixels and 18 VW. Okay, so step 8. It is a useful property of the selectable vector graphics that it contains a path attribute which allows the image to be scaled without affecting the resolution of the resultant image. Currently, the image is assuming its default size, which is too large. Correctly scale the image using its ID as a selector and setting width to max 100px 18 VW. Okay. Step 9. As described in the FreeCodeCamp style guide, the logo should retain an aspect ratio of 35/4 and have padding around the text. First, change the background color so you can see the logo. Then, use the aspect ratio property to set the desired aspect ratio to 35/4. Finally, adding some padding. Okay, so need to Step 10. Make a header take up the full width of its parent container. Set its height to 50 pixels and set the background color to that. Then add a display using Flexbox. Change the H1 font color and set its font size to that. Okay, so H1. Step 12. To enable navigation on the page, add an unordered list with the following 3 list items. The list items should be wrapped in anchor tags. Step 13. Target unordered list items within nav elements and use a flex box to evenly space the children. Step 13. Target unordered list items within nav elements and use a flex box to evenly space the children. Step 14. As this is a quiz, You will need a form for users to submit questions. You can semantically separate the content within the form using section elements. Within the main element, create a form with 3 nested section elements. Then make the form submit to this link using the correct method. Step 15. To increase the page accessibility, the role attribute can be used to indicate the purpose behind the element on the page to assistive technologies. The role attribute is a part of the Web Accessibility Initiative and accepts preset values. Give each section element a region role. Step 16. Every region role requires a visible label, which should be referenced by ARIA labeled by attribute. To the section elements, give the following ARIA labeled by attributes: student info, HTML questions, CSS questions. Then within the section element, nest one H2 element with the ID matching the corresponding ARIA labeled by attribute. Give each H2 suitable text content. Step 17. Typeface plays an important role in the accessibility of a page. Some fonts are easier to read than others, and this is especially true on low-resolution screens. Change the font for both H1 and H2 elements to Verdana and use another web-safe font in a sans serif family as a fallback. Also add a border bottom, okay, to the H2. Okay, so Step 18. To be able to navigate within the page, give each anchor element an href corresponding to the ID of the H2 elements. Step 19. Filling out the content of the quiz. Below the student info, add 3 div elements with a class of info. Step 20. It is important to link each input to the corresponding label element. This provides assistive technology users with a visual reference to the input. This is done by giving a label a for attribute which contains the ID of input. This section will take the student's name, email address, and date of birth. Give the label elements appropriate for attributes as well as the text content, then link the input elements to the corresponding label elements. Step 21. Keeping in mind best practices to form inputs, give each input the appropriate type and name attribute, then give the first input a placeholder attribute. Step 22. Even though you've added a placeholder to your first input element, this is actually not the best practice for accessibility. Too often users confuse a placeholder text with an actual input value. They think there is already a value in the input. Remove the placeholder text from the first input element, relying on the label being the best practice. Arguably, date of birth is not descriptive enough. This is especially true for visually impaired users. One way to get around such an issue without having to add visible text to a label is to add text only a screen reader can read. Append a span element with the class of SR only to the current text content of the third label element. Step 24. Within the span element, add the text date of birth. The SR only text is still visible. There is one common pattern to visually hide text for only screen readers to read. This pattern is set the following CSS properties. Use the above to define the SR only class. Within the second section element, add two divs with the class of question block. Within each div question block element, add one p element with the text of incriminating number starting from 1 and one field set element with the class of question. Each field set will contain a true and false question. Within each field set, nest one legend element and one unordered list element with two options. Step 28. Give each field set an adequate name attribute, then give both unordered lists a class of answers lists. Finally, use the legend to caption the content of the field set by placing a true or false question as the text content. Step 29. To provide the functionality of a true or false question, we need a set of inputs which do not allow both to be selected at the same time. Within each list element, nest one label element, and within each label element, nest one input element with the appropriate type. Add an ID to all of your radio inputs so you can link your labels to them. Give the first one an ID of Q1A1 and the rest of the IDs a Q1A2, Q2A1, Q2A3, respectively. Step 31. Although not required for label elements with a nested input, it is still best practice to explicitly link a label with its corresponding input element. Now add a for attribute to each of your four labels that links the label to its corresponding radio input. Step 32. Give the label elements text such that the input comes before the text. Then give the input elements a value matching the text. The text should either be true or false. Step 33. If you click on the radio inputs, you might notice both inputs within the same true or false field sets can be selected at the same time. Group the relevant inputs together such that only one input from a pair can be selected at a time. Step 34. To prevent unnecessary repetition, target the before pseudo element of the P element and give it a contact property of question number. Okay. The final section of the quiz will contain a drop-down and a text bar. Begin by nesting a div with a class of form raw and nest 4 div elements inside it, altering their class attributes with a question block and answer. Step 36. Within the div question block elements, nest one label and give the label elements text content. Step 37. Within the first div answer element, nest one required select element with 3 option elements. Give the first option element a value of quotes and the text select an option. Give the second option element a value of yes and the text yes. Give the third option element a value of no and the text no. Link the first label element to the select element and give it a select element a name attribute. Step 39. Nest one text area element within the second div answer element and set the number of rows and columns it has. Then give the text area placeholder text describing an example answer. Step 40. As with other input and label elements, link the text area to its corresponding label element and give it a name attribute. Step 41. Do not forget to give your form a submit button. Step 42. Two final semantic HTML elements for this project are the footer and the address elements. The footer element is a container for the collection of content that is related to the page, and the address element is a container for the content information for the author of the page. After the main element, add one footer element and nest one address element within it. Within the address element, add the following. The address element does not have to contain a physical geographical location. It can be used to provide a link. Wrap the link around the text FreeCodeCamp and set its location to freecodecamp.org. Back to styling the page, select the list elements within the navigation bar and give them the following styles. Step 46. On the topic of visual accessibility, contrast between elements is a key factor. For example, the contrast between the text and then the background of the heading should be at least 4 0.5 to 1. Change the font color of all the anchor elements within the list elements to something with a contrast ratio of 7 to 1. Step 47. To make the navigation buttons look more like typical buttons, remove the underline from the anchor tags. Then create a new selector targeting the navigation list elements so that when the cursor hovers over them, the background color and text color are switched and the cursor becomes a pointer. Step 48. Tidy up the header by using Flexbox to put space between the children and vertically center them. Then fix the header to the top of the viewport. Step 49. When the screen width is small, the H1 does not wrap its text content how it should. Align the text for the H1 element in the center. Then give the main padding such that the student info section header can be fully seen. Step 50. On a small screen, the unordered list of the navigation bar overflows the right side of the screen. Fix this by using a flexbox to wrap the UL content, then set the following CSS properties to correctly align the text. Step 51. Set the width of the section elements to 80% of their parent container. Then use margins to center the section elements, adding 10 pixels to the bottom margin. Also ensure the section elements cannot be larger than 600 pixels in width. Step 52. Replace the top margins of the H2 elements with 60 pixels of padding. Step 53. Add padding to the top and left of the class info elements and set other values to 0. Give the form row element a top margin, a left and right padding, and other padding values should be 0. Then increase the font size for all input elements. Step 55. To make the first section look more in line, target only the input elements within the info elements, class info elements, and set their width to 50% and left align their text. Step 56. Target all label elements within the info elements and set their width to 10% and make it so that they don't take up less than 55 pixels. Step 57. To align the input boxes with each other, set the display property to inline block for all input and label elements within the info class elements. Also align the label elements text to the right. To neaten the class question block elements, set the following CSS properties. Step 59. Make the paragraph elements appear as a higher priority with the following CSS properties. Step 60. It is useful to see a default border around the field set elements. During development, however, it may not be the style you want. Remove the border and bottom padding on the question elements. Step 61. Remove the default styling for the list items of the answers list and remove the unordered list padding. Step 62. Give the Submit button a FreeCodeCamp style design with the following CSS properties. Step 63. Set the footer background color and use Flexbox to horizontally center the text. Step 64. Now we cannot read the text. Target the footer and the anchor element within the set and font color to the color of the adequate contrast ratio. Step 65. Horizontally center all the text within the address element and add some padding. Step 66. Clicking on the navigation links should jump to the viewport to the relevant section. However, this jumping can be disorienting for some users. Select all elements and set the scroll behavior to smooth. Step 67. Certain types of motion-based animations can cause discomfort for some users. In particular, people with vestibular disorders have sensitivity to certain motion triggers. The @media @rule has a media feature called prefers reduced motion to set the CSS based on the user's preferences. It can take one of the following values: reduce, no preference. Wrap the style rule that sets scroll behavior smooth within the media @rule with the media feature prefers reduced motion having no preference as its set as the value. So finally, the navigation accessibility can be improved by providing keyboard shortcuts. The access key attribute accepts space-separated list of keys. For example, give each of the navigation links a single letter access key. It's not always advised to use access keys, but they can be helpful. Well done. Now you have completed the accessibility quiz practice project. And that's it. We are finished with the project. Thank you guys for watching the video. Have a great day.